Have you ever felt like you were trying to be strong, but inside you were silently falling apart? There was a time when you screamed. He screamed for love. He was screaming for attention. I screamed for a hug that never came, for an answer that never arrived, for someone who could see the soul behind the mask. But their cries went unheard, or worse, they were ignored, and that broke something inside you. So, you shut up. No, because it doesn't hurt anymore, but because he learned that silence can protect, that the soul, when tired of shouting to those who do not listen, withdraws. It is protected. It is saved. Sometimes the soul doesn't scream. She just shuts up and hopes someone notices. Rumi wrote, "When you stop screaming, you start listening to what your soul has always wanted to say." And maybe that's what's happening to you right now. Your silence, which on the outside seems like indifference, on the inside is survival. It is the armor you put on to avoid giving away again what was once offered for free. Your soul, your presence, your truth. Your silence is now protect what your screams delivered. Words, wishes, emotional truths that you once offered with an open heart. But the world didn't know how to deal with it. They stepped on it. They despised it. And you learned. It hurt, but you learned. You learned that not everyone deserves to hear the voice of your pain. Not everyone has the maturity to welcome what screams within their soul. Not everyone knows what to do with their naked truth. So you chose silence, not as a prison, but as protection, not as cowardice, but as emotional wisdom. What no one sees is that this silence carries ancient screams, screams that echoed inside you for years, cries of abandonment, rejection, emotional loneliness. You screamed for connection, but he found absence. He screamed for validation, but he received judgment. He cried out for love, but he received a lack disguised as presence. And then you understand the more you scream, the more you lose. The more you explain, the less they understand you. The more you give of yourself, the more fragmented you become. Silence then was a form of healing, to pick up the pieces, to go back inside, to find a place where the soul could rest without needing to justify itself. This silence that surrounds you today is not absence. It is wisdom. It's spiritual. It is sacred. It is the language of the soul that is tired of being misinterpreted. And the most profound thing about all of this is that now, what you protect in silence has more value than everything you shouted about before. You don't shut up because you're empty. You are silent because you now understand the value of your presence. You keep quiet because you discovered that the world doesn't need to know everything. He doesn't even deserve everything. Your silence carries poetry, truth, maturity. And if someone wants to know who you are, they will need to learn to listen to what is not said. You will need to delve beyond the words, because the essence of your soul don't scream anymore. And perhaps it is precisely now in this moment of deep silence that you begin to find yourself again, to listen to heal. Because yes, silence heals. Rumi said, "Silence is the language of God. Everything else is a bad translation." And perhaps you are for the first time hearing God speak to you through that silent void that no one understands, but which deep down is where your soul is finally at peace. But is silence really just protection? Or is there something deeper going on? Maybe what you are experiencing now is not just the end of a phase. Maybe it's the beginning of something even more true. And that's what I need to talk to you about now. Maybe what you are experiencing now is not just the end of a phase. Maybe it's the beginning of something even more true. Because when the soul chooses silence, it is not giving up. It's discernment. It's as if she were saying, "I'm tired of shouting at people who never wanted to listen." And in this silence, something new begins to be born. A new version of you, more serene, more profound, more aware that what is precious is no longer given away just any way. If this message spoke to your soul, write in the comments now, "My silence is my sacred protection. I read every word." Because this channel is not just a video space, it's a meeting place, from soul to soul. And if you felt that in some way, this video describes something that you keep quiet about. Don't let this go. This content was made with truth, with the intention of reaching those who are tired of shouting. So leave your like. This isn't just a button. It's a signal that this kind of messaging needs to continue. Subscribe to the channel because each video here is a key. A key to unlock something you might not even know you needed to hear. But above all, stay with me until the end, because what comes next is even deeper. Let's go down another step inside you together and find the root of the silence that protects you today, but that also carries the pain that no one saw. Have you ever felt like you said too much and were ignored? As if each of your words was too heavy for someone who only knew how to hear what they wanted? As if every time you opened your mouth to express something true, intimate, raw, the other person's silence responded with indifference? Even worse, as if every time you cried out for help, you were handing over a piece of your soul to someone who didn't know how, didn't want to, or simply couldn't care for it. This is how many emotional wounds begin, not with a scream, but with the empty echo that comes after it. You give yourself, you show yourself, you beg for connection, but in return, you receive emptiness, and this emptiness weighs. This emptiness shapes you. Over time, what was transparency turns into distrust. What was presence becomes emotional absence, and what was a voice became silence. Now, you shut up. But is this silence really healing? Or is it just armor? A way to not expose yourself anymore? A way to not get hurt again? There is a point at which pain stops being momentary and becomes behavior. You adapt to rejection, get used to the absence, and he begins to hide his feelings as a way of survival. Not because you want to, but because your body, mind, and soul have decided that enough is enough. You protect yourself as best you can, and silence becomes your most faithful shield. After all, no one can hurt you if they don't know how you feel. No one can reject the part of you that has never been revealed. No one can mock your pain if it is never shared. But this protection comes at a cost that is not always visible. You start to pull away from everything, from those who love you, from those who try to reach you, and mainly, of himself. This is where the invisible problem lies. This pain that no one sees. That internal struggle you fight every day, smiling on the outside but screaming on the inside. And the cruelest thing about all this? The more you remain silent, the more the world believes that everything is fine. The more you keep quiet, the more people label you as strong, cold, distant, without ever realizing that this silence is made of scars. You weren't born this way. You were shaped by experiences that taught you that feeling too much is dangerous, that demonstrating is weakness, that loving without filters is an invitation to abandonment. You have been conditioned to swallow your own pain, smiling when I wanted to cry, saying, "It's okay," when everything inside you wanted to scream, "Listen to me, please." But Rumi said, the soul has a code that only the heart understands, and when no one else understands, it falls silent. This is what is happening to you. Your soul is silent not by choice, but by exhaustion. She's already tried. She's already searched. She's already screamed. But now, she watches. And this silent observation may seem like control, maturity, but often it's just fear. Fear of giving yourself up and not being accepted. Fear of trusting and being betrayed. Fear of opening up and ending up alone in the end. How many times have you tried to explain yourself and come away even more misunderstood? How many times have you thought it would be different and it was all the same? How many times have you felt like you were talking to walls? With people who are emotionally absent, cold, unable to see beyond what is visible? The truth is, your pain is not invisible. She's just hiding behind a behavior that she learned to defend herself before expressing herself. And this silent behavior, which seemed like protection, became a prison. It's like you've built a fortress, tall, tough, untouchable. But the problem is that now, not even you can get out of it. You find yourself surrounded by walls of your own making, walls of silence, walls of distrust, walls of phrases never said, messages never sent, feelings never exposed. And inside, in that space that no one knows, you cry, not with tears, but with memories, with absences, missing a time when I still believed that being vulnerable was safe. This is the invisible problem. The silent disconnection that takes you away from everything that once made you feel alive. And you only realize it when you're already too far away, even from yourself. But all that could change, because the silence that protects you can also heal. He just needs to be listened to truthfully. It needs to be understood, not as a weakness, but as a cry for help. And maybe right now, At this very moment, your soul is doing that, asking silently to be heard. If this made sense to you, if at any point in this speech you felt like you were listening to your own story being told, write in the comments, "I also hide in silence." Only those who have been through this will understand. And maybe, just maybe, this is the first step to getting out of this emotional fortress you built to survive, but where you are now, forgetting to live. In truth, you're not silent. The world may no longer hear your voice, but inside you, there are screams that never ceased. There are words that echo unspoken. There are feelings that beat against the walls of your chest, trying to escape, but that you've learned to contain. Not because you want to, but because you had to. Because every time you tried to express yourself, you weren't understood. Because every time you tried to open up, someone closed the door even tighter. Because the price of being true always seemed to be abandonment. The soul never stops speaking. It simply changes the direction of its voice. And when it realizes no one is listening on the outside, it screams inward. This is the most silent scream, and at the same time the most painful. The scream that no one hears, that no one understands, that no one welcomes, but that you carry every day, as if it were a normal part of existence. Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters." But what do you do when that wound is denied? When the world insists on making you silent, ignoring, smiling over a pain that hasn't healed? The answer is simple and cruel. You learn to sew that wound with silence. Silence becomes the end of conversations you wanted to continue. It becomes the wet pillow no one sees. It becomes the lost gaze in the middle of a crowd that doesn't notice. It becomes the tightness in your chest that you call fatigue, but deep down it's your soul asking for space to breathe. This silence you've learned to maintain isn't just a behavior. It's a reflection of a spiritual truth many avoid facing. The wounded soul protects itself in the invisible. It creates invisible armor to prevent further falls. It isolates itself, not out of pride, but out of saturation. The spiritual root of your pain lies here. You've distanced yourself to survive emotionally. And when that happens, you begin to believe that this distance is you. That you're cold, that you're distant, that you no longer feel anything. But that's not true. You feel everything, more than you should. You've only learned to silence your feelings to avoid the chaos that always follows vulnerability. This silence is the language of a soul tired of begging for attention, tired of trying to fit into spaces where only absence existed, tired of trying to be understood by people who didn't even know how to listen to their own hearts. And in the midst of all this, you withdrew, not physically but spiritually. You retreated, you kept, you sealed. The problem is that by doing so, you not only protected yourself, you also disconnected yourself from the world, from relationships, from your very essence. Silence became not only sacred protection, but an emotional exile, a place where the soul hides, believing it's safer there even if it hurts. And this pain isn't just any pain. It's a spiritual pain, a pain born from the disconnect between who you are and what the world can receive from you. It's the pain of a soul that came to love deeply, but learned to protect itself from a love that always returns wounded. It's the pain of those who went too deep with shallow people, of those who were true in a world of appearances, of those who felt too much and were therefore discarded. But there is something even deeper to all this. The silence you carry today is sacred because it holds secrets of your soul that have not yet found space to blossom. It holds truths that have not been heard, but remain alive. It holds versions of yourself that have been silenced, but not destroyed. It is an inner temple, an altar where your essence still dwells, even if wounded. That's why this silence is so strong, so dense, so layered. It's not empty. It's filled with everything you couldn't say, with everything you felt that wasn't validated, with all the swallowed words, all the hidden tears, all the silent goodbyes you had to say without explanation. And maybe this silence isn't just a symptom. Maybe it's the beginning of a new path, a path where you begin to listen to your own soul before trying to be understood by others, a path where you understand that true healing won't come from outside, but from within, because it is there, at the invisible root of your pain, that something needs to be touched with truth, with presence, with light. Maybe your soul is just waiting for this, a safe space to express itself without fear, a place where you don't have to defend yourself to exist, where you don't have to scream to be heard, And maybe this video is exactly that space. If you felt that this silent truth spoke to you, if you recognize that cry that no one hears, that wound that you stitched together with silence, write in the comments, "My soul still screams even in silence." What no one told you is that this silence you carry in your chest, often mistaken for coldness, distance, indifference, is in fact the echo of a wisdom that only those who have suffered greatly can understand. The world interprets your silence as emptiness, but what lies within is the fullness of a soul that no longer offers itself to just anyone. You didn't stop talking because you had nothing to say. You stopped talking because you learned that there are things too sacred to be thrown into the wrong ears. You learned, the hard way possible, that there are souls that don't listen. There are hearts that don't feel. There are presences that are by your side, but have never truly been with you. And that hurts more than absence. A presence that doesn't welcome, that doesn't notice, that doesn't listen. It hurts. It hurts silently. It hurts deeply. It hurts like someone taking something from within you without asking permission. And after so many times when you gave too much of yourself, when you tried to explain what you couldn't even name, when you shouted truths that no one cared to decipher, your soul understood. It understood that it needed to protect itself, that it needed to return, that it needed to keep quiet to survive. So now you choose silence. And this, contrary to what they say, is not weakness. It is strength. A strength that doesn't scream but sustains. A strength that doesn't impose but imposes itself through what's unsaid. The silence you carry today is the key that closes doors where you once lost yourself. It's the key that locks rooms of the soul where people have entered who didn't even deserve to pass through your entrance hall. It is your shield, and also your sanctuary, because within this silence lies peace. Not a complete, resolved peace, but a survivor's peace. The peace of someone who understands they no longer need to beg for affection, that they no longer need to bend over backwards to be understood, that they no longer need to bleed in public to prove they're wounded. You now do not say, you observe. You do not justify yourself. You choose. You do not beg. You remain silent. And that's healing. That's true emotional alchemy. It's when pain stops being noise and becomes a lesson. When the soul stops chasing and starts attracting. When the heart understands that what's true will never force you to be silent, but it will also never demand that you scream. Rumi said, "What you seek seeks you." But only when you stop shouting to the world do you begin to listen to what calls to you from within. And this inner listening, this reconnection with your own soul, only happens in silence. A conscious, spiritual, intentional silence. That's where the key lies. The key no one gave you. The key that isn't in books, nor in ready-made phrases on social media. The key lies in your experience, in the path you've taken, in the mistakes you made trying to be loved, in the wounds left open because you loved too much, trusted too much, believed too much, and that today teach you more than any words. The truth is, no one prepares you for that moment when you look in the mirror and realize that to remain whole, you'll have to retreat. You'll have to stop explaining how you feel. You'll have to stop trying to fix what can't be fixed. You'll have to accept that there are pains that only dissolve when you stop carrying them like a flag. And when you do that, when you stop justifying yourself, overgiving yourself, emotionally abusing yourself to fit in with others, something changes. You begin to realize that what you were searching for out there was never there. It was here. It was always here. Inside. You were the space that was missing. You were the presence you asked for. You were the embrace you never received. And perhaps for the first time it's becoming its own refuge, its own temple. And this was only possible because of the silence. The silence you fear is the same one that is rebuilding you. It is in this voiceless space that your soul is finding the strength to be reborn, to rise up, to love yourself, to respect yourself, because you are discovering the value of being whole in your own presence, that you no longer need to prove anything, that you should no longer surrender where there is no reciprocity, that love can be even in silence. Rumi wrote, "Love is what remains when the silence remains." And perhaps that's what you're discovering now. The love that remains, even after the voices have fallen silent. Love for yourself, for your story, for your journey, for the courage to keep going, even when no one saw you fall apart. If this spiritual key opened something within you, if these words touched some forgotten part of your soul, Write in the comments, "My silence is my sanctuary." Maybe you cried out for love, for care, for a look that said, "I see you." Maybe you waited for words that never came, for answers that were always almost there, for promises that dissolved into thin air as if what you felt was too much to be sustained by the other. And then, with each failed attempt, each time you opened up, something in you closed off, not all at once, but little by little, almost imperceptibly. You tried. He tried to be understood. He tried to be welcomed. He tried to be listened to. But every time he spoke with his heart exposed, it seemed the world responded with absences, with distraction, with lack of reciprocity, as if your delivery was invisible, as if your pain were a nuisance. And then you screamed, not necessarily with the voice, but with attitudes, with long messages, with silences loaded with meaning, with weights that no one noticed, with insomnia in which your soul begged for connection. You cried out for love, yes, for care, for lap, but it was like shouting in the desert. You spoke and only heard the echo back, until one day, that scream stopped, not because the pain has passed, but because you understood. You understood that what is sacred is not exposed to just anyone. You understood that your soul can no longer be placed in emotional showcases waiting for someone, out of pity or distraction, to decide to see you. And that's when you went silent. But this time, silence was not giving up. It was maturity. It was reverence. It was a spiritual gesture of protection. Because your soul is sacred. Your presence is sacred. Your vulnerability is not weakness, yet it's pure gold. And you realize that you could no longer distribute this gold to those who didn't even know how to value it. You started keeping what you used to give away. And this keeping is not hiding. It is to preserve. It's like putting something precious inside a velvet box and leaving it there, in a safe place, away from careless hands that only know how to pick it up, but don't know how to care for it. Maybe you're experiencing this right now. Maybe there is someone in your life who was once everything, that made your heart race with a message, with a touch, with a promise. But today, that same person barely notices when you go silent. You don't notice when you withdraw. Don't ask why you stopped trying. And you learned not to charge. He learned not to insist, because he understood that the presence that needs to be requested will never be true, that the love that needs to be explained will never be complete. So you stopped talking, from sending that last message, to try one more time. And it wasn't out of pride. It was out of self-respect. It was because you realized you were wasting your soul to keep alive something that only existed because you insisted, because you supported, because you were feeding on hopes that deep down were already dashed. This is the real application of the key we talked about before. It manifests itself when you find yourself in front of someone who once had access to everything you are, but who now only finds your silence, not for revenge, but because you no longer need to prove anything. You've already tasted it, with gestures, with deliveries, with silent tears, with longing felt alone, with weights that you disguised as everything is fine. And now, you choose to withdraw, because his soul understood what his heart was reluctant to accept, that true love does not require constant sacrifice, that true connection never tires, that real care doesn't need to be begged for. You choose to be silent, because in silence you finally find yourself. You choose to withdraw because within you there is still a flame, and it needs to be tended, not erased by foreign winds, not weakened by chronic inattention, not shaped by absences disguised as presence. You understand that if anyone wants to hear your soul today, they will need to sit on the floor of your temple. You will need to be silent with yourself. You will need to learn to listen to what is not said, to feel what is not shown, to honor what is invisible. And if that person doesn't know how to do that, you will no longer translate into pain. You will no longer put yourself in the place of explanation, because you are not a problem to be solved. You are a soul in constant rebirth. And whoever wants to walk with you, you will have to understand the value of your silence. If this example spoke to you, if it seemed like something you've experienced, or are experiencing now, write in the comments. I have learned to keep what is sacred. You are not silence. You are the one who had the courage to silence the world, to finally listen to yourself. This is the point at which the soul stops begging for attention and begins to inhabit its own temple. The point at which you realize that what hurt wasn't the silence itself, but what was trying to scream inside you, and that no one wanted to hear. So you stopped. You took a deep breath, and you understood that sometimes silence isn't silencing the pain. It's giving space for your inner truth to speak louder than the voices outside. Rumi said, "Don't settle for stories of how others lived. Awaken your own legend." And maybe that's what you're doing right now. You are waking up, not with noise, but with awareness, not with explosion, but with presence. You begin to understand that this moment of silence, of retreat, of emotional detachment, is the beginning of a new version of yourself, a version less dependent on other people's validation, a more soul-connected version, more faithful to your own process. Before, you had to speak to exist. Today, you exist in silence, and that is strength, spiritual strength, emotional strength, invisible force that cannot be proven. It can be felt. You spent so much time trying to fit in, trying to be understood, trying to be loved the way you love, that you ended up forgetting the legend you carry inside you. But now, with this shift in consciousness, you begin to remember, to get closer to something that was lost inside you, something that time, traumas, relationships, breakups tried to erase, but what never ceased to exist, its essence. And this essence is not weak. She is sensitive. And sensitivity is not a spiritual defect. It's a gift. It is your ability to feel deeply what others only pass through. It is the gift of perceiving silences in eyes, of hearing words that were never spoken, of intuiting what is behind masks. And that gift was what hurt you the most, because you felt too much in a world that feels too little, because you offered depth to people who only knew how to swim on the surface. And when this happens, the soul gets tired. But now, she is waking up. And waking up is not as pretty as it is shown on social media. Waking up is uncomfortable. It's realizing that you were surrounded, but never accompanied. It's understanding that you were the one who always saved yourself. It's remembering the times you cried in silence while the world called you strong. It's seeing that many have moved away not because you changed, but because you stopped keeping quiet to fit in. This is the turning point. When you understand that your healing will not come from outside, that no one will complete you, that the most important love you can receive is your own, that the soul is no longer seeking just any presence, it is seeking its own, your own light, your own lap, your own home, and that home is you. You begin to realize that everything you've experienced up until now, no matter how hard it was part of a process of refinement, lapidation of the soul, lapidation of the sacred, polishing what really matters. You are no longer trying to be perfect to be accepted. You're just being, and whoever manages to find you now will find you whole. The spiritual strength that grows within you is not made of noise. It is made of lucid silence, of self-love not displayed but lived, of wisdom that comes from pain experienced, not from pain avoided. You are not what they made you. You are what you chose to become, even with everything you lacked. You are awakening your own legend. And that's scary. It scares those who never wanted to see you free. It scares those who only knew how to love you when you diminished yourself. It scares even you, because you're finally leaving behind versions you've carried for so long that you thought were you, but they are not. You're not the one who begged. You are not the one who would erase herself to be chosen. You're not the one who lived on emotional crumbs. You are light. You are presence. You are silence that heals. You are a fire that warms, but that can also burn what does not honor you. And this silence that you live today, this choice to go back inside, to move away from the noise, to let go of what doesn't see you, is the first step toward something greater. You are returning to your center. It is rebuilding itself. You are hearing, for the first time in a long time, the sound of your own soul. And she's saying, "Now it's about me." If these words touch something inside you, if at any point during this video you felt like you were hearing what you always wanted to say, write in the comments, "Now it's about me." If you've come this far, it's because something inside you has been touched. Because this silence we carry, so invisible to the world, found an echo in this space. And if this video spoke to your soul, don't let that connection be lost. Subscribe to the channel now, because here, silence also has a voice. Here, every wounded soul, every untold story, every pain that no one saw, is welcomed with truth. Here, You don't have to shout to be heard. And if you stayed with me until the end, leave your like. Not out of habit, but as a silent gesture of, I was here, and I was touched by this truth. Now, watch the next video that is appearing on the screen. He is the continuation of that journey. It's another key, another step on the way back to you.